November the 23rd, 1989, and possibly the most influential British guitar band of the last 20 years were making their debut on Top of the Pops. The group were Manchester's The Stone Roses.
Musically, they could have been bigger than the Beatles, you know, because they had it.
Having just released one of the most acclaimed debut albums of all time, they had the world at their feet.
They was fresh, they was real, and the music that he was doing was just brilliant.
But then it all went horribly wrong. Within a few short years, the Stone Roses had split.
I don't like the way it ended. It was all messy and in the business of making music, not in the business of fucking ruining friendships.
Who was to blame for the Stone Roses' downfall? Some accused their manager, Gareth Evans.
I gave that band 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I did it for that band.
He was a salesman, but, you know, a rather nasty, cheap salesman.
I'm a fucking good manager. I'm a genius. I'm the best.
This is the inside story of how a band on the verge of greatness saw their world fall apart, their career destroyed by bad business deals and multi-million-pound lawsuits.
People ask me, why take them to court? Why the aggravation? I wanted my money.
The guy's got no morals whatsoever. But, yeah, one day it's going to come back and bite him on the arse hard. I can't wait to piss in his grave.
For years before their legendary appearance on Top of the Pops, the Stone Roses were still a million miles away from success. Suffering from an image problem and hated by most of Manchester, the band had hit rock bottom. Rhythm guitarist with the Stone Roses then was Andy Cousins.
We'd been blacklisted by, it felt like the whole of Manchester was pushing us out, you know, City Life, who were the local ride factory, everybody, we couldn't get any gigs anywhere, it was just a nightmare.
The Roses' number one enemy was Manchester's Factory Records, the brainchild of local impresario Tony Wilson and home to such bands as the painfully cool Joy Division.
Tony Wilson hated us. He actively tried to stop us doing anything. You know, every corner we turned, we felt like he was there shutting the door. You know, it was. But we wanted nothing to do with them at all.
All the people that worked for Factory were fucking squares. You know, they had the grey overcoat mob banging on in coffee bars about poetry. You know, and going to see films with subtitles. Very fucking dodgy people.
How does it feel to treat me like you do?
But if Manchester hated the Stone Roses, the feeling was mutual.
The music scene, we were always separate from. We actively made sure that we were separate from it. I mean, our first gig, it wasn't by any accident that it was in London, it was by design. We didn't want to play, we didn't want to be associated with Manchester at all. It was a horrible place.
To show their contempt for their hometown, the Stone Roses took to the streets.
We went out and sprayed Manchester's monuments. I think we were barred for life at that point from the likes of City Life, and there was absolute uproar all over Manchester, but yeah, it was very funny.
One person who definitely didn't see the funny side was the Roses' first manager, Howard Jones.
I thought it was disgraceful, but I understood their reasons for doing it. They were trying to say to Manchester, the Tony Wilsons of this world, F you, mate, you know, people are going to know we're here.
But the message wasn't getting through. In 1985, the Stone Roses unleashed their first single on an unsuspecting public. It was met with disastrous reviews.
With hindsight, none of us were happy with the way it came out at all. At the time, I think we were probably excited by it, but later on you listen and think...
By now, Howard Jones's other role as head of the band's label, Thin Line, had become a major bone of contention.
could never quite tell where his interests were, you know. And then when you start to realise that he's got 20% of the record sales as a manager and 20% from Thin Line, and that started feeling a little dirty.
Jones was given a stark choice: his label or the group.
And I made the decision that Thin Line was more important than managing the Stone Roses, which I still stand by.
With no gigs, no manager and no record deal, the Stone Roses were in a rut. What they needed was help, and fast.
They seek him here, they seek him there. His clothes are loud, but never square.
The man they turned to would become the key figure in both the Roses' meteoric rise and their downfall.
'Cause he's a dedicated follower of fashion.
Music promoter Gareth Evans' first foray into business had seen him take on and conquer the cutthroat world of hairdressing.
I went to have my hair cut at Vida Sassoon as a model, and he personally asked me to work for him. He said I looked the part.
Selects wiggies and stripes, 'cause he's a dedicated follower of fashion.
In all, I had 11 salons and 5 or 6 franchises under our name, Gareth and Colin Crimpers. I had 2 in Piccadilly, Manchester, Rusholme, Bolton, Stretford, Manchester, Burnley, etc.
Evans' reputation as the best blow-waver north of Watford led to an ever more impressive client list.
Whose hair did I cut? Martin Buchan, ex-Scotland and Manchester United captain, Peter Barnes of Manchester City, and their wives.
But Evans would eventually hang up his scissors to cash in on Manchester's very own rock and roll revolution. By the mid-80s, the Northwest had become a breeding ground for some of the hottest new talent about. Bands like the Happy Mondays, fronted by the legendary Shaun Ryder, were putting Manchester on the musical map.
It was a mishmash, total mishmash. You know, I mean, you had us, and then you had Spiral Carpets, Simply Red, Swing Out Sister. You know, so we was a proper melting pot of music.
There was a vibrant music scene in Manchester, and I wanted to be part of it.
Evans got his chance when the lease for local nightclub Ocean's 11 came up for grabs.
So I popped in, and the offices above, the landlord was there, and I did a deal to lease it off him.
Renaming the club the International, Evans quickly established it as the main rival to Factory's Hacienda.
International was like an old 70s nightclub, you know, a carpet on the floor. It was a great place for a gig. I mean, the sound was shit. But it was an old, you know, it was an old nightclub.
Look at this place. Look what they've done to it. The International. This was the famous International. They used to queue all the way down here. Way down there for R.E.M., Simply Red, all the bands.
From down on Capitol Hill, we tried it. Money too tight to mention. I can't get an unemployment extension. Money too tight to mention.
It was a dump. You wipe your feet on the way out. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't a place where you'd take your girlfriend on a first date.
Well, it's now Venus Foos or Food Centre. Fabulous times, great memories. I loved it.
But Evans wanted more.
People try to put us to down.
Although he'd soon added a second club to his name, Evans began to realise that the really big money to be made from music lay in managing groups. In 1986, he placed an ad in his local paper which would give him his big chance.
I always had what it takes, and I knew I could do the job. And obviously a lot of bands, I saw a lot of bands, and people did ask me to manage them, and I refused a lot. Well, I did, I refused everyone.
I could have given Gareth a piece of wood and said, compare the merits of this piece of wood to this album, and he would have said, I can't tell the difference.
A lot of the so-called Manchester music scene, this probably includes Tony Wilson, Howard Jones, they didn't know about my background. I mean, remember, I'd had Keith Moon in a Ford Zephyr. driving him around Manchester.
He now tells everybody that he was a mod in the 60s and, you know, he was a sort of ace face, which is laughable, you know. As far as I'm aware, Gareth never had any musical taste whatsoever.
Despite these question marks over his musical pedigree, Evans' search paid off when a young, managerless band called the Stone Roses turned up unannounced at the International.
I didn't really have to convince the band that I was the manager for them, because they came to a lot of the gigs we did. A lot may be an exaggeration, but they saw I always had a small entourage and I was always around. And maybe I looked the part in those days. I was a lot younger.
First meeting with Gareth Evans, he was very, very cheesy the whole way through. All the time he had a roll of money with a rubber band on, and every time he stood up or sat down, this money would drop out, just constant. Like, look at me, I've got money, which was just farcical.
I really do believe they saw something about me.
Gareth was one of those men who got a bit of a paunch, slightly overweight, wearing tracksuit bottoms with a piss stain on the front, and an old pair of trainers.
Halfway through the meeting, Evans played his trump card.
He said, I sell underpants. He dropped his trousers and he said, I'll sell these. It was just insane.
I only pulled my trousers down, showed my knickers. It went no further.
Swayed by Evans' sophisticated selling technique, the band sat down to discuss a contract.
It was a parental guardianship agreement rather than a music business management agreement, which gave him all sorts of rights over all of us, you know.
Crucially, the contract gave Evans and his business partner a hefty third of the band's earnings for a staggering 10 years.
I think you have to have 10 years with a band if you're serious about it. You know, what is this 1 year and 2 years and 3 years? You know, it's a load of nonsense.
Someone who's seen more than his fair share of management contracts is music lawyer James Ware.
Looking at a management contract which contains a commission of 33 1/3% on gross revenue, that's before you've taken any expenses, and a 10-year term, we're looking at a contract that's not only extortionate, it's outrageous.
So outrageous that Andy Cousins refused to sign. With no official contract, Gareth Evans now faced the problem of what to do about the rebel, Andy Cousins.
I wasn't keen to get Andy out. I never thought of it until John Squire told me he didn't like writing with Andy in a low voice. And he said to me he had to go, but he didn't know how to do it, so I did it.
Evans' method was simple but effective, to drive a wedge between Cousins and the rest of the band, in particular singer Ian Brown and lead guitarist John Squire.
They were doing most of the songs at that point. Andy Cousins was doing some, but I straight away thought McCartney and Lennon, Squire and Brown.
Gareth wanting me out was nothing to do with creative hubs or any of those things. It was purely a control aspect from his point of view.
Andy didn't have any talent. Andy was an old-style rocker, and that wasn't the way they were going.
With Cousins refusing to budge, events took a dramatic turn.
Gareth offered me 10,000 quid to leave the band. I should have taken it because he was desperate to get rid of me.
If I'd have made Andy Cousins a cash offer to make him leave, and maybe I did, he would have took the money. There isn't a man on this planet that wouldn't have took £10,000.
Finally, the dispute came to a head.
We had a gig in Dublin and I'd got something to do on the Monday morning. So I booked myself a plane home. I didn't think anything of it.
Smelling blood, Evans accused Cousins of being disloyal.
I blew my top. I was very annoyed. What a dramatic statement, but they went in a van together, they should come back together.
For someone to miss that journey back to me is wrong, you know, is wrong. And I could see in the band's eyes that they weren't too chuffed about it.
I think he arrived at the offices of the International and started talking to me, and I think between myself and the doorman we tried to wash his hair in the toilet.
He's a liar. I was a very nasty young individual, and no, he never ever laid a hand on me.
In front of the rest of the band, Evans launched into Cousins.
Basically, I was the most disloyal person on the planet, and I wasn't really interested in what he had to say about it, but I turned round to John and Ian and said, "Are you having this?" You know, because he was there shouting to the left up, and they were sat there. I said, "Are you having this?" And they both went, so I just thought they had left.
With Cousins out of the way, Evans at last got his contract. In November 1986, over bowls of spaghetti bolognese, the band met to sign on the dotted line.
It surprises me even to this day that John and Ian, who were my closest friends, fell hook, line and sinker for his money dropping and free haircuts and taking him out for a meal. Even now I can't believe it. You know, and that was all it was with him. I think it was just a control thing.
Despite his victory, Evans couldn't afford to sit back. It was now time to deliver. Above all, he realised that he had to find the Stone Roses a new record deal, but his eventual choice of label would leave everyone scratching their heads.
They'd been hyped all around the record industry, played to every label. Record companies just didn't want to know, even though I had the International.
In desperation, Evans took the drastic step of approaching obscure heavy metal label FM Revolver, run by elaborately coiffured rocker Paul Birch.
We were a rock label, and we always have been, and you know, by that definition we'd say we would do every kind of rock, punk, metal, indie, every kind of guitar music.
I knew they weren't the right label because Paul Birch had leopard skin trousers on, hair down to his waist, and was smoking some sort of funny cigarette.
We met Gareth, and he came across as a really, really nice bloke.
With FM Revolver chomping at the bit, Evans' only problem was getting the band to agree to the deal.
I couldn't get them in the office. John Squire walked in and made an excuse to leave the office, and he was outside on the lawn in hysterics. I think Paul Birch had a hairnet on with leopard skin trousers that day, but Ian Brown knew they needed a single.
The band eventually signed and soon found themselves in the studio to record a song that would change the way people viewed the Stone Roses once and for all.
I remember in Sally Cinnamon for the first time and thinking, I can do that, you know. I can write songs like that. And it was just bang, you know. Everything went into colour. From being grey, dowdy, fucking Manchester students carrying books of Oscar Wilde poetry under their arm, walking around a pissing rain, moaning about how shit life was, you know. It was about peace and love, man.
Sally Cinnamon was the start of something big. It got to a new audience for them. It was catchy. It was about a girl. Was it about a girl called Sally Cinnamon? You know, thinking about it, it was a good record, and it was done very cheaply.
Soon after the single's release, the Stone Roses changed personnel for the final time, as bassist Pete Garner left to be replaced by long-term friend of the band, Manny.
I was basically on catch-up. Ian, John and Rennie were already like really accomplished players, and I had to do quite a lot of hard work to get myself up to speed.
Manny was the last piece of the jigsaw, you know. He's totally infectious. He's infected. He's infected with everything.
With a new sound and a fresh lineup, the stage was now set for the Stone Roses to take the music world by storm. With a single to promote, the Roses' manager, Gareth Evans, went into overdrive, blagging airplay, calling in favours and generally getting the band noticed.
I am a wheeler dealer, but I don't like the term. I make deals. I make deals in the best interest of the band at the time, and a lot of people miss this. It's got to be at the time, and I hustle them into that deal.
To give the impression his band were on the up, Evans was boosting attendances at gigs with his own unique brand of marketing.
For some bizarre reason, we were in town and it was the Lord Mayor's Parade. And this guy come up and just gave us a bunch of tickets and said, "Do you want to go and see a band tonight?" And I said, "Yeah." And they were just tickets for the International. He didn't have the band's name or anything like that. And subsequently, we realised many years later it was Gareth Evans, but apparently he used to do that quite a lot to people who looked cool in Manchester, which I was very impressed about.
The canteen at Manchester University, everyone got a ticket with their tray. I used to put them under the trays individually, and I think I only ever got kicked out once.
But free tickets was as far as Evans's generosity went.
Dealing with Gareth in anything to do with money is always a battle.
There was one point in time where we were on £60 a week wages, right? Lots of money, yeah. And you'd have to chase the guy for about a week to get you 60 quid out of it.
Maybe he's right, maybe I was a bit tight, but it wasn't their money in the beginning. It was our money we were using. We weren't going to give them 100,000 to spend. It was for promotion, complimentary tickets, posters, clothes, everything like that. That's the deal I made with the Roses.
In early 1988, Evans made another deal, one which would go down in musical history. He persuaded the Stone Roses to sign perhaps the most oppressive record contract of all time, a contract which would play a major part in the band's demise. But this new record deal meant sticking the knife into Paul Birch and FM Revolver.
Gareth was starting to become more and more edgy and evasive and difficult to get hold of, but then really quite angry if he couldn't get hold of anyone that he wanted to speak to in our team.
They were never interested in the Roses. They weren't even bothered. There was a period after Sally Cinnamon came out, they weren't bothered. There was no money for gigs, no money for promotion. We did it all from the International. It was all my money.
Meanwhile, expectations within the band had also been growing.
We expect to be huge or we wouldn't be doing it. We expect to be a big group. We know we'll be a big group. It's just a matter of the people that don't like us to catch up.
I would go out tonight, but I haven't got
The band's confidence seemed well placed when cool indie outfit Rough Trade, the company behind the spectacular Rise of the Smiths, came knocking.
Jeff Travis was sniffing about, and at one point we were actually going to sign to Rough Trade primarily because we'd gone down to London. We met him in that pub, the George, at the side of Euston Station, and he gave us money to get an Italian when we got back to Manchester, so we went, that guy's spot on, we'd sign with him, Daniel, because he gave us money for food and stuff.
But Evans had other ideas. He'd set his sights on dance label Jive Records, home to 80s chartbuster Billy Ocean.
I saw the potential because they had Billy Ocean, they had Def Leppard, they had Ruby Turner maybe, other people like that, but they had no Stone Roses.
Despite misgivings within the band, Evans eventually got his way.
How did I get them to sign to Jive? I'm a genius, I'm the best. How can I possibly do that? Obviously, the band had massive faith into me. I've only just figured that. They had faith into me and it was the right decision. My persuasive talk was massive. It was the best thing I ever did.
In the spring of 1988, Evans and Jive sat down to thrash out a deal. To help with the complexities, Evans took the bizarre step of calling in his property lawyer, someone with absolutely no experience of music contracts whatsoever.
I think the problem with Jive as a record company was that its contracts were notorious in the industry. And for myself and for most of my colleagues, I wouldn't recommend an artist to sign it.
The contract Jive were offering the Stone Roses, in effect, tied them to the label for life. But Evans returned it with barely an alteration. With one flourish of the pen, Gareth Evans had set in motion a chain of events that would come back to haunt both him and his band.
I knew that was a bad contract. I knew what I was doing. I knew that contract would never stand up in court. That's why I signed it. I read it. That contract was tantamount to slavery.
I can't conceive that a manager would deliberately sign a bad deal on the basis that that would give him the ability to get out of the deal later. I am sure the manager went for the best deal he could get and advised the band to take it.
Despite the fact that the Stone Roses were still signed to FM Revolver, the heavy metal label gave up the fight and watched their band walk away.
It takes time for people to fall in love with you, but it's inevitable.
The Stone Roses now began to really hit their stride. The next 12 months would prove to be the most creative of the band's entire career, resulting in one of the most important albums of all time. Jive had recently created a new label called Silvertone and asked its boss, Andrew Lauder, to listen to a tape of their latest signing.
I was pleasantly surprised when I heard it because it was I didn't really know what to expect at all, and it became apparent that this was a group that listened to a lot of the same music that I had over the years.
Lauder agreed to take on the band, and within weeks the Stone Roses were in the studio.
When we started recording the first album, we used Battery Studios, which is in Wellsden, and we used to use nighttime lockouts because it was like cheap and it was just downtime from the studio, so we'd be in there all night. It was just great watching how these songs would develop and mature kind of thing. It was a really, really fun time, and it's joyous moments on a daily basis. It's great.
After the Silvertone deal, the change was immense, was massive, was just exciting.
This is Gareth, our manager. Very exuberant character. He's got charisma.
Everybody wanted to be in the studio. The thing just took on a different context, if that's the word. We went into space.
But it wasn't only their sound which the Roses were perfecting. Just as important was their look.
How would you feel when you see people walking out of one of your gigs?
Depends what they look like. If they're dressed well, then I'm a bit disappointed.
And well-dressed meant well-baggy.
It's just how we always dressed, you know. We always wore semi-flared pants. Those woolly backs in Manchester, man, you know what I mean?
I've always known about fashion from my hair days. I did fashion shows in the early days in Manchester, hair shows combined with fashion. So I always knew about the look. I can't take full credit for it, but they passed things by me.
Do you know what? For the guy with the worst fashion sense in the world, if he told me to wear something, I'd tell him to fuck right off. You know what I mean?
Meanwhile, the new album was almost finished.
I felt, just obviously from the early recordings and things, that the first album could be very good. I think as we went along, it did surprise me in some way that it was quite as good as it was.
Before long, the band were releasing their first singles for Silvertone. Both records featured the artwork of John Squire on their sleeves and helped to cement the Stone Roses' reputation as more than mere musicians.
Just like doing certain things and writing songs and painting a two of them.
John always had very, very definite ideas of how he wanted things to sound, how he wanted things to look. You know, the Jackson Pollock thing was great. It's like, yeah, let's paint the guitars up, let's paint the drum kit up. Extremely talented guy that way.
My influence on the art with John Squire Whenever I went to his house, he talked to me. He always passed things by me. He'll never admit it. And even on occasions when he had a big canvas out, I'd often dip a brush in a can of Dulex or something similar and splash it about, like, is it Jackson Pollock? That sort of thing.
Finally, in April 1989, the band released their debut album. Produced by John Leckie, dialed twiddler for such bands as Simple Minds and XTC, it confirmed the Stone Roses as music's hottest property.
John Leckie was always good at getting great sounds. You know, he used to work at Bloody Abbey Road and stuff, and he made a great piece of work. Still stands up to this day, man.
They had it, they had the songs, the fucking image, everything.
You know, it was like, fucking hell, man. This is what it must have been like seeing the Beatles for the first time.
You know, there isn't no doubt in your mind that they was winners.
The Stone Roses had come a long way. Almost overnight, it seemed, they transformed themselves from musical outcasts into the band on everyone's lips.
Just to watch it come from like nothing to what it became was like awesome. It's like we really felt we had power to move mountains, you know, musically at that time.
But not everyone was pleased with the band's success. More than a year after the Stone Roses walked out on his record company, FM Revolver boss Paul Birch found himself at the centre of the most controversial episode in the band's career to date. Letting the Roses go had turned out to be an expensive mistake.
Had the band recorded the album for us, then the revenue streams that would have accrued would have amounted to about £16 million.
Birch decided to reissue his only Stone Roses release, Sally Cinnamon, but first he needed a video.
The band didn't want to perform in the video because now they're signed to another record company. Gareth's telling us, sorry, but you no longer have the right to produce the video.
But Birch went ahead anyway.
The video was very much in keeping with videos that the group were producing at that time. It was mostly images of Manchester and of a mysterious girl, Sally Cinnamon. But the group immediately decided that they hated the video.
When we saw that Sally Cinnamon video, we were gobsmacked, man. It was just cheap.
I had every member of the band bawling at me. And I don't think I'd ever seen the fucking video.
We asked him nicely several times, don't do this video, you know, we don't mind you re-releasing the record, but this video is just fucking without art, basically, you know, and it's bang out of order.
So I thought, right, great opportunity. I said, do something about it. And it went on from there.
En route to a recording session in Wales, the band made a quick detour.
I think we told Steve Vance to stop at Fad's DIY Centre in Northenden. We need to get loads of tins of paint and some overalls and stuff like that, and Steve's going, why? And John's going, oh, I'm going to do some art. So we loaded up and went, do you mind if we just stop in Wolverhampton a second, as he was driving us down?
We pulled outside the offices of the record labels, a couple of cars outside, a Merc and something else. And John Squire said, Steve, stay in the car. We don't want to think that we brought people to burst the door in with us. Well, we just want to have a word with them.
There's a knock at the door, and my wife comes from my office and says, look, you know, the Stone Roses are at the door. I said, okay. So I went to the door, and all hell broke loose.
And he's come to the door, and Rennie's let him have a full 5 litre tin of fucking gloss. And John's let him have one over him and his missus.
You know, you think you know how you're going to react in a situation like this. Believe me, you don't know how you're going to react.
And then we're just with like Brook Bond chimps on LSD running around just fucking smashing shit up.
The story they didn't tell was that they had this paint stripper and harmful chemicals. You know, the cans with the big X on the side, you know, harmful to your skin.
I think that's me, that was going to do his cars with it. But it all happened so quickly I didn't get a chance to do the cars anyway. We smashed his cars up anyway, so there's no need for the nitromos. We then pelted back to the car. Steve, I just like, what have you done? He's like, fucking drive, man. And we drove down to Monmouth to Rockfield Studios.
Well, the rain exploded with a
As we got there, Black Sabbath were there, right, just loading out, and we met Geezer Butler and Tony Iommi, and they're going, "One fucking eye, dead poor birds, nice one."
Well, Gareth was on the phone the next day, laughing about what had happened, and say that we'd go an awful lot worse than that.
The Stone Roses were arrested the following day, and a few months later found themselves in the dock.
When we got to court, there were huge crowds. It was like a rock concert.
Gary Mountfield, John Squire, Alan Red and Ian Brown arrived at Wolverhampton Crown Court to a noisy greeting from about 30 fans.
Even on the way down to court that morning, we didn't know. I was like, kiss your bird and say, "I'm seeing you in 6 months, love." We were fucking discussing how not to get bummed in prison.
Manny was pestering me all the time, worried that he was going to prison, and said, "I'm not doing it for you, Gareth. I'm not going to prison for you. It doesn't matter how big it makes the band."
But the group's fears were laid to rest when they were let off with just a fine, much to Paul Birch's disgust.
How can it be detrimental to the career of an artist for them to be exposed in the media? For instance, this publicity hype, in our estimation, has already bought them in excess of £250,000 worth of publicity alone.
If the band had have gone to prison, we would have all won out of it. It would have been a nice holiday for them, they'd have got fit, done plenty of weights, and they'd have had to have written songs. What a better place to write songs.
Ever since the release of their album, the Stone Roses have been grabbing headlines of another sort, with a string of highly unusual one-off gigs.
Basically, we used to just take risks and try and get as many people into one place. You know, if we turn up, then the people will come, hopefully.
In May 1990, the Stone Roses announced their biggest and most ambitious concert to date, Spike Island.
It was just some field in the middle of the Mersey with bloody chemical works there and stuff.
Manchester's answer to Woodstock would be talked about for years to come. But some see it as the event which triggered the Stone Roses' downfall. For many of the 35,000 fans who turned up, Spike Island got off to a bad start.
Just remember they'd been there all fucking day. Thank God it wasn't raining. I know the support bands were fucking atrocious. Whoever put that bill together had no sense of the event.
Spike Island was done with all our money, remember? We set it up with our money. The Stone Roses didn't have money then.
It was done on the cheap, I thought.
A cheap job. I put bridges across the canal. I fenced the whole site. A cheap job. Remember, it was only £13.50 a ticket. For an outdoor gig, are you sure?
The words piss up and brewery spring to mind on that one. You'd think if he was on the Mersey estuary, someone would have the foresight to check on whether the tide's going to be unusually high that day, you know what I mean?
The worst would have been if it would have rained while they were all on the island.
The guy would blunder his way through things. People could have ended up drowning and shit, you know what I mean?
Eventually, at a little after 9 o'clock, the Stone Roses launched into their opening number.
The sound was shit. They played a fucking blinder, you know, but you couldn't hear anything because the wind was coming in off the whatever fucking river it is off the Mersey and blowing this. You could hear it in bits and pieces.
The gig for me was a bit of a non-event. I think we played okay, but the wind was blowing the sound that way when the people was over there, kind of thing. It was pretty badly thought out.
But in spite of everything, Spike Island was a turning point.
Everybody wanted to say, I am part of this movement, I am part of this thing. There was Japanese, Americans, Canadians, Spanish. It was the world celebrating what the Stone Roses represented.
Gareth Evans saw that he was now sitting on a gold mine. Spike Island was the proof that the Roses had the potential to become the biggest band on the planet. It was time to play hardball.
After Spike Island, I realised that now was the time the band had to walk from Silvertone, unless they came up with a massive advance. And I was thinking of 5 million.
But Evans' decision to point a gun at Silvertone's head would mark the moment when the Stone Roses began to unravel. it appeared that Evans held all the aces. Frankie Goes to Hollywood singer Holly Johnson had just had his oppressive long-term record contract torn up by the courts. And an oppressive long-term contract was precisely what the Stone Roses had signed with Silvertone.
The contract was a shambles. I can't remember the exact words, but it broke every legal convention is the right word, and I knew we could get out of it. I was so confident.
Gareth couldn't have known. It's once again, just taking enormous risks with everyone's futures. You know, that's the kind of guy he was. He'd put everything on 17 red, you know what I mean, and for the consequences kind of thing.
Horrified by Evans's demands and worried that the Stone Roses could be about to walk, Silvertone fought back. In August 1990, they slapped an injunction on the band, preventing them from recording for anyone else. For the Stone Roses, it was like having the plug pulled on their career.
So the band then go from being in a situation of doing exactly what they want to do, recording an album and then going on, then get themselves shot in the foot and can't record or can't do anything because the man who's supposed to look after all that has cocked up.
The band were totally kept in the picture on this. I told them that if we took legal action, we would get out of this. I was always totally upfront with the band.
Oh, he's never upfront with anyone about anything, that guy. Proper snake. I think we had bloody lousy advice. There again, it's the naivety of being a young band who really doesn't know how the business side of it works, you know, and you just invariably get shafted, you know, everyone does.
You know, when you're a musician and writer, what you want to do is get your music out. You know, I've not been allowed to record for 7 years. I know what that feels like. It feels shit.
The situation was fast developing into all-out war, but Silvertone boss Andrew Lauder was still determined to win the Roses back.
With due respect to Andrew Lauder, I think he realised that the deal was absolute garbage, and I think he knew that would tumble onto that, and he did try hard actually to make it right, you know, all credit to him.
In December 1990, Silvertone authorised the payment of a Christmas bonus to the band.
The Christmas advance was totally my idea. I said, the band, it's Christmas, we all need money, they've worked hard. They agreed to pay $10,000 each, $40,000.
But hardly any of the money would find its way to the group.
I admit I kept some money back from the Christmas advance, but the Christmas advance was my idea. It would never have been there. It wasn't on the contract, nowhere on paper. It wasn't for me. I didn't spend it. It was for the court case.
The court case which both parties accepted was now inevitable. Confident that the Stone Roses would eventually win their freedom, Gareth Evans set about finding his band a major new label. This meant going to America.
It's a big business. A big, boring, fat old business. You know, saying that, if you sell a lot of records over there, you become filthy fucking rich. And basically, at the end of the day, that's what we all wanted.
On a trip to LA, Evans immediately found himself playing with the big boys.
I was going to America as the guest of Warner Brothers, and while I was over there, in the Statler Hilton Hotel, a message came over from David Geffen, would I like to go out for dinner?
Geffen, head of the label behind rock behemoths Guns N' Roses, met with Evans at his favourite Italian restaurant.
David Geffen had his whole team there, and we didn't talk a lot of business.
Nevertheless, Evans still managed to walk away with a cheque for a cool £300,000 to help fund the impending court case.
Now, in paying our legal costs, whether they had the total right to sign the band, I never totally understood at that point. I was not a music lawyer. But the upshot was that Geffen thought we were their band.
It just seemed like a real logical move, you know. Let's go record for a big major. We were looking towards America, you know, let's go. If we got one of the biggest labels in America behind us, and we've got a chance, you know. All we've got to do is make tunes.
But with the legal injunction still in place, making tunes was fast becoming a distant memory. Finally, in March 1991, the battle between the Stone Roses and Silvertone came to court. To people's surprise, Silvertone's lawyers kicked off by launching a devastating attack, not on the band, but their manager.
I think there was a suspicion that the relationship between Gareth and the group maybe wasn't quite what everyone thought it was. I think probably the legal team thought that this was worth exploring.
And explore it they did, by drawing the court's attention to the fact that Evans' management team were entitled to a whopping 33% of the band's earnings.
When Silvertone leaked the 33 1/3% out, that was dirty tactics, but I'd been used to dirtier tactics than that in my life, and it didn't bother me.
When he was in the witness box and he was flanneling, and you could see the guy was just completely out of his depth.
They knew about that contract. They always knew about it. No money was taken from it. They knew that I told them it was scrapped.
Silvertone's lawyers next switched their attention to the £40,000 Christmas bonus, an amount which came as news to the band.
We was like, you're gonna fucking die, you.
I may not have told them about that advance, but I didn't tell them about anything to do with the business. It wasn't their job. Manny was never the brains in the band.
After 8 more weeks of legal wrangling, the Stone Roses arrived at court to hear their fate.
When the judge came to look at the contract, he basically struck it down on 2 or 3 essential issues. One was the length of the tie, 7 albums. The judge thought that was too much. The second thing was that there was no real obligation on the record company to release product. The band could be sterilised for a very long period of time, and the judge felt that that was not justifiable.
For the man who'd played a key role in transforming the Stone Roses from no-hopers into one of Britain's biggest bands, it was a devastating personal blow.
I felt let down because we'd invested a lot of time and effort, and I thought everybody involved had done a very good job, and it was the right thing at the right time, and then we got the right people, and we'd made the right record with the right producer, and how often does this happen, So it was very disappointing to see it ending up this way.
Freed from their Silvertone contract, the Stone Roses could at last sign to Geffen and collect an advance of just over £2 million. But it wasn't just the money that was no different. The string of courtroom revelations had changed the band's relationship with their manager Gareth Evans for good.
That was a minor fracas between the band and management. It'll be okay. Our solicitors will sort it out.
In retrospect, I should have been more open with the band on the legal costs. But, they always told me they didn't want to be bothered with all that. They trusted me. I know that.
When there's that loss of trust, it's like if someone shags your missus, man, then you're never going to be able to trust that person again.
Within weeks of the Silvertone verdict, Evans was sent a letter informing him he'd been sacked.
What upset me was the Roses really didn't understand what I'd done. But then I was beginning to think that they weren't clever. The band were never clever. They were never a clever band.
But the Stone Roses would also pay a heavy price for their newfound freedom. With money to burn, the band slowly started to drift apart. When John Squire and Ian Brown bought themselves houses in Manchester's exclusive stockbroker belt, the dynamics of the band changed overnight.
We'd kind of prided ourselves on being the last gang in town, and we all lived relatively close to each other, and we used to hang out in each other's houses and stuff, and then everyone starts moving away and stuff like that, so you haven't got that kind of gang mentality anymore, and That made life really kind of difficult as well.
You know, when money does come in and, you know, one member buys an house there and one member buys an house there, you know, and then that's when it all starts falling to bits. You've got to stick together.
In 1992, 3 long years after the release of their first album, the Stone Roses went back into the studio to start work on the follow-up.
When Silvertone injuncted us, it was so difficult to regenerate the momentum, you know, get it going again, and that's probably the times when we thought of just fucking calling it a day sometimes, but then thought, no, you know, we can't, we've manoeuvred ourselves into this position now, it's only fair that we give it a shot, you know.
I need to be myself.
But times were changing. As the Stone Roses struggled to recapture their magic, a new wave of bands were rewriting the musical landscape, led by Manchester's latest pop prodigies, Oasis.
We want to blow out every other band into oblivion. As simple as that.
Amongst their first victims were the Stone Roses. When the new album, called The Second Coming, finally hit the shops, more than 5 years after its predecessor, it bombed.
We approached it in a different way. We didn't have the songs before we waited. We thought, right, well, the most stupid, expensive way to do it is to move into a studio and try and write as you go. And it just went tits up. Absolutely tits up. It was just like throwing money into a bottomless pit.
And in a dramatic final twist, the Stone Roses now discovered that they were being sued by Gareth Evans.
When we heard that Gareth was then going to take us to court for breach of management contract, after we'd fucking stopped pissing our sides laughing, then the anger started, you know. The guy's got some balls and some neck, you know.
People ask me a lot of times, why take them to court? Why the aggravation? I wanted my money.
And Evans knew just how to get it.
I started collecting paperwork ages before the court case. I got letters saying how instrumental I was in helping the band. I had letters from Silvertone. I had letters from lots of people. I started building up a file.
Faced with such a wealth of written evidence, the band's legal team had little option but to back down, offering Evans an out-of-court settlement in the process.
You know, I thought with the amount of evidence that we had on him, no judge in the land would kind of find in his favour, but I think we must have used all our luck up with Judge Gerald Humphreys, man, to get out of the Silvertone deal in the first place, you know. Maybe we were due a kick up the arse.
I see trees of green.
Evans ploughed the money into his latest venture, a luxury 27-hole golf course on the outskirts of Manchester.
Of course the Stone Roses money went into the golf course, but money came from membership, from banks, and from other sources.
But exactly how much of the course was paid for by his ex-employers remains a mystery.
To this day, I don't know how much we got. Approximately, was it 100,000? Was it £1 million? Was it £2 million? I'm not sure.
In October 1996 came the news that the Stone Roses had split. For the band which had spearheaded the reinvention of British pop, it was clear that their time had been and gone.
Musically, they could have been bigger than the Beatles, you know, because they had it.
While money, personal rivalry and changing tastes all played their part, some say the roots of the Roses' downfall go much, much further back.
You have to lay responsibility with someone who's the manager of the group if it doesn't work out, you know, because that's what you do. You are managing their career, presumably.
The Roses' career ground to a halt, but no blame can be attached to me whatsoever. It was self-destructive once I'd gone.
The Stone Roses would have happened without Gareth. They happened despite Gareth. They would probably still been together in one form or another and been a lot more successful if Gareth hadn't got involved. He was chaos.
The band's grievances were built from smoking too much dope and paranoia. I was the best thing that ever happened for them.
But what they had at that time, fucking hell, my left leg could have fucking managed to have made them big.
I have regrets with my time with the Stone Roses. The regrets are that I never showed my true feelings to them. I really love those guys. but it never worked out.
What a fucking... I don't know, but, you know, if a guy's got a neck like that, then fair play to him, you know, he's got to live with himself. Come the judgment day, man, he's got a lot of fucking questions to ask himself, you know.
But one question Evans has the answer to is what he'd do if the Stone Roses ever got back together again.
If the Stone Roses reformed, I'd jump at the chance to manage them. They can only be great with me. I am one of the Stone Roses. I am the Stone Roses. That's crap. No, that is I am the Stone Roses. What a load of fucking lies. I can't even play a guitar.